Aloha and welcome to the SolarCoaster live show here at Solar Power International. We've got a great show ahead for you. We're actually going to be talking about an ESG, environmental and social governance. We're going to have a lot of opportunity to kind of walk through this together. I want to say aloha to my co-host, Jason Bearcart.
Good morning. Aloha.
And we got Brian Thomas on the line, or the Zoom line, here with us as well. Now, Brian isn't exactly a guest because it turns out, and we didn't realize this out of the gate, but he's been on about 1.5 years of episodes. So I think you're basically a SolarCoaster guy as far as I can tell. So aloha, Brian.
Aloha. Great to be here, gentlemen.
All right. So very excited today to take a moment and kind of reflect on what we experienced this past year or more, really, from the moment that Brian Thomas came on the show. You know, we reached out to Brian and we said, hey, we'd really like you to come on the show and help us better understand what's going on with ESG and the financial markets. And so we did that. We brought you on. You were on every show for that solid year plus. And by the way, thank you for that.
And well, I want to thank you guys, because whether you had the foresight or you were lucky, hard to say, but you had to have me on talking about what was the #1 performing sector in the U.S. stock market, which was the performing market. So for 2019, and it's still a powerhouse sector in the entire world. And so it just so happens to be that it's a neat topic, but it happens to be the #1 performing sector too. So congratulations. And it's been exciting to both learn from you guys and also participate in that sector this whole time.
#1 performing sector. Yeah, I totally knew that was going to happen. And there was no surprise whatsoever. So
perfect. Yeah.
I don't think we knew precisely what was going to happen. However, I mean, if we did, we would have bet big. But that's kind of what the conversation is all about. But there was definitely a feeling of some things going on. We knew things were happening, things were moving, and a lot of other people in the industry were talking about it. I mean, every week in the news we'd talk about something, some big move, big money coming in, large companies, big oil, starting their whole renewable energy themed products. I mean, I'm sure they were doing stuff behind the scenes for many years, but it was becoming very, very public that a lot of money is moving and it's heading in this direction.
From what I saw was the confluence of storage and generation occurring with also smart home management. And so all this stuff sort of happening at the same time. And then the costs still coming down that entire time period, right? So the cost of renewables still falling, even though the ITC was down from 30 to 26, but that cost curve just keeps coming down, and gets to the point where it's economically feasible to make it work.
There you go. So those were kind of the ingredients, if you will, to get us into this discussion. And for those of you who don't know us, let's do a little intro here. Okay. So we here at SolarCoaster Radio show in Maui, we've been running a radio show in Hawaii for about 3.5 years. We've about 170 episodes or so. And recently, we took on the challenge to do the SolarCoaster live show at Solar Power International and North America Smart Energy Week. We did, I think we've got about 15 or so micro shows that we've been airing in the virtual education platform over the last 7 weeks. And it's been a lot of fun. And we really enjoyed that process. And it's good to be able to participate even in this new way with SBI. Of course, we miss going to the shows, right? So we do have that background with the show, 1 hour weekly radio show where we dive into all things new energy economy. Jay, do you want to add anything to that?
Oh, I just want to clarify, it was really AM/FM radio in Hawaii. We are also available at www.solar-coaster.com, where you can get all our old shows. We archive everything and stick it up there for folks to peruse at their leisure. If you're interested in a particular topic that we've discussed, renewable energy related over the years, we've talked everything from EVs to hydrogen to wind to biofuels. I mean, we've talked about it all, and it's a deep archive at this point. So I would definitely encourage people to check that out. We're also available on podcast networks, iTunes, Stitcher, iHeart, TuneIn, all carry the SolarCoaster, so you can get us there. But touch base on www.solar-coaster.com anytime, and you'll be able to find us.
And then we had a couple of great companies on that were able to support the show. We want to just say thank you to them and show you how to reach these companies. So number one is EnduroShield. Now, EnduroShield is a really neat technology. Basically, this is a coating that allows glass and to be able to not be cleaned as much as it typically needs to be. This coating is used on some really famous and identifiable things. For example, the spire on top of the Freedom Tower. Why do you put this coating on there? Because it's difficult to clean it, right? Not easy to get up there and clean that spire. Not a job a lot of people want. Better to coat it with EnduroShield and make it, have less cleaning requirements, less frequency of cleaning requirements. So can you imagine where this connection between the solar industry might go? We're talking about a coating that minimizes the amount of water and oil. It's oleophobic and hydrophobic. One of our other sponsors, Osiaco. Osiaco, what a cool group of guys. They're out of Montreal. Mark Forget, Dan Fletcher, launching a technology that quite candidly is missing in the industry. We're talking about an inverter, a one-stop solution for dual EV charging, and very high efficiencies, very aesthetic design, basically an inverter that can meet all of your needs for your home energy system. Unprecedented energy and power capacity. And the thing they say you get for free is the bidirectional EV charging, not to mention the first home supercharger for your EV. Talk about unbelievable technology. That's what the SolarCoaster does, finds this technology, gets jazzed about it, and make sure everybody else hears about it as well. I could not be more excited than I am about the DC Bell from Osiaco. And then, of course, Adapt Energy. Troy Morgan, Megan, all the great people over there in Texas at Pantech Design, the creators of Adapt Energy. These guys are working and have been pioneering in many respects for 2 or 3 years now at minimum, the smart control panel, dynamic load panels called the Adapt Energy panel. Adapt Energy, these guys are working with the Crestron systems. Crestron is in the White House, it's in Manili Bay and on the coolest places around the world. This is robust home energy automation. You got to check out Adapt Energy. You got to check out their panel and the CY and the type of steps they're taking to make it very robust commercial grade technology. Thank you for supporting the SolarCoaster. So now, Brian, let's jump right into the meat of this story. What is ESG? What does it mean? Help us understand, what this acronym is and how it fits into our show.
Sure. ESG stands for Environmental, Social, Governance. And it used to be called SRI, Social Responsible Investing. And it's essentially whether you choose to screen companies out of a basket of stocks that you own, called an index, or only include certain companies that meet a specific criteria or filter. And there's different versions of it because people have different values, essentially, that translate to stocks that they want to own or would preclude stocks that they may not want to participate in. And so it's been shown that people, a fair amount of people, want to have their money, not just making them money, but also doing good by society, right? And be that in an environmental manner or a governance manner, manner like corporate governance essentially, or some social criteria that they choose. And so it's attracted massive amounts of money recently. Companies like BlackRock have decided that they want to put some of that 7 trillion or so assets under management that they manage into ESG, like a specific amount of their assets under management towards ESG. And so how solar and renewable fits into that is that those are in that environmental category, and those companies have done well. And so it fits into that mandate. And there's a lot of money that's still going to move into it. And it's the fastest growing segment of assets under management in the entire investment universe. Yeah. In fact, there was just an article out today. PricewaterhouseCoopers said that, let me get the exact numbers here, but they imagined that this is Europe, because it's a little bit more popular in Europe as far as the total percentage of ESG funds, assets under management, but they said that sustainable and responsible investment funds are expected to reach 7.6 trillion across Europe over the next 5 years. So by 2025, that they said that ESG funds will hold the most assets under management, which is a little bit optimistic, I think. But in any case, I mean, that's
Gotcha.
Europe. But it still, it shows you that it is definitely capturing a lot of the investment dollars of AUM, which is assets under management in the investment industry.
As we were talking about and learning about these different types of securities, TAN, for example, is one that we talked a lot about. We talked about this on 50, 60 shows. And it was, well, what is an ETF? I don't even know. It's an electronically traded fund, right? You brought that to our attention. And it's a basket of all of these different stocks, in the case of TAN, in the solar industry, right? That's where they're focusing.
Yeah.
But it started to look like, not only in the news, but also in the markets, that we started to see this resilience and growth and strength in this sector. So it was no longer like, in my mind, a sacrifice I need to make. It's now actually a strategy for optimal growth. Does that sound right to you?
100%. And we can quote the surveys, and you can go back and listen to the shows where I've talked about, and I mentioned the actual surveys and the results. But in the past, social responsible investing, I got in the business in '98. And back then, it would be a drag on the portfolio if you allocated money to SRI, social responsible investing. But people are okay with that because they know that their money is doing good for society. So that's okay. But that dynamic has changed. And now those are, by having an ESG filter, those are actually doing better. And just to give you an idea, that we talked about, and you mentioned TAN, the ticker symbol for an ETF, exchange traded fund of solar stocks. And that one, way back in June of like 2019, we were talking about it, and it was a high performer back then, but it's continued to do well because it is receiving money that's being allocated more and more to an ESG mandate. And so Josh and Jay, that ticker symbol TAN is up. It's the #1 performing ETF at 170% over the past 6 months, positive. You would think, oh, semiconductors are doing the best. Well, it's actually solar stocks that are doing the best. And of course, this is not a recommendation, right?
Yeah.
And past performance is not indicative of future performance. We have to put the caveats in there.
You can keep those flying in here, Brian. That's okay.
Yeah.
Say it as much as you need to. Yeah.
It definitely gets me excited because you just see this massive transformation, and from way back when it did have a drag. But you know, capitalism gets a bad name, but like this is capitalism at its good side, which is rewarding companies that are doing right by the market, being innovative, taking care of their employees and society, right? And so, you know, those numbers that I talked about with TAN, there's other ETFs that are renewable energy ETFs. For example, PBW is up 141% over the past 1 year. And that encompasses a broader range of renewables, right? And so with the cost coming down of solar and being competitive with carbon fuel, it ought to only increase from that point going forward.
What excites me is that people have the opportunity to participate in this new energy revolution, if I can call it that. And there's different ways one can participate. Of course, talking to a solar guy, 9 years in the solar business in Maui, Hawaii, you can get a solar system and that'll do a bang up job of saving you money and allowing you to participate in the new energy revolution. No doubt about it, especially in Maui, where energy is about 30 cents a kilowatt hour and doesn't seem to be going down despite all the solar systems we put in, right? So that participating in the new energy revolution in that manner is viable for many people. But not everybody has a home to put that solar on, right? Or like a home that they own, or maybe they're moving and they're just not ready to make that type of decision, or whatever. I was fortunate to have kind of a unique insight into the venture capital world and into the accredited investor world through some consulting projects over the course of the last few years. And one of them was funding or supporting the process in funding the world's first green cruise ship. That's the EcoShip project. So I spent the better part of a year pitching VCs, but what I kept hearing from these different groups, these different funding groups all across the country, from Toronto to Vancouver to LA to San Diego. What I kept hearing from these amazing people that I had very high regard for was that these were the breakout winners for the next decade. These were the Amazons, these were the Facebooks, these were the Googles. A segment in the beginning of the radio show where you would cover a piece of ESG, right? And it was 2-3 minutes. It was, this is what's going on in the markets, and this is what it is. And you reiterated the value proposition of ETFs like TAN, for example, of what was happening in the markets. We talked about, you talked about news oftentimes from the lens of ESG or from the lens of the financial markets. And then we learned a lot through that process. But during that, because we did it on the radio show, I had people calling me and saying, Josh, how do I participate in this?
Sort of highlight what you're talking about. If you go back and listen to some of the early shows, when I was saying, if you don't have the money to buy a whole solar system, and most people, or some people don't, rather, you can still participate in the industry by having one of these ETFs or some different ones in your investment account or your IRA, right? If you have an IRA at a bank, you're earning 0.25% per year.
I had asked Brian during the year that you were on to, at a certain point, once I felt I basically understood what was happening with ETFs and some of the solar stocks. And bear in mind, a lot of these guys, for better or for worse, we've not only met them, we've had them on the show multiple times. We sit down with them and talk to them at length about their technologies. I would say in a pretty forward-looking way. I was able to make some picks in my mind, but it was not easy for me to get off the bench, so to speak, and actually invest. And I said to you very simply, let me know when it's a good time to do an experiment, right? That was it. And we left it at that. And we left it at that for a while. And this is an interesting story, guys, right? So basically, COVID hits, markets go into turmoil. I'm working on my car one day, sometime in March-ish or something like that. And Brian says very simply, Josh, today's the day you want to fund that account. And I was like, oh, well, maybe I'll do it in the next day or so. I'm kind of busy.
Yeah, I said, if I could be bold.
And I was like, yeah, of course. What are you trying to say? You said, do it right now, basically. So I wanted to do an experiment with my daughter. So we funded an account. And I made some picks based on the last year of discussion and based on hours of dialogue with a lot of the guys that run these companies, right? And I didn't think too much about it, and I was kind of nervous. I'm like, oh, I don't want to lose this money. What's going to happen, right? So what's the result of that? Pulling up my Ameritrade account.
It's at this point where I say, this is not financial advice and this is not a financial recommendation. And so
there you go.
Part of what Josh was doing was to show his daughter and teach his daughter about putting some money to work.
I basically was able to purchase a few stocks. I purchased Enphase at $26.35, and as of today, at this moment, it's up 340.26%. I purchased PBW at $24.45. As of today, it's up 185.31%. And I purchased TAN at $23.10, and as of today, it's up 223.8%. Looking at this little experiment that we did here, I say to my daughter, well, I don't think this is typical, Julia. I think that this is a very unique thing that we just experienced.
Yeah, I mean, the context to talk to her about it is that if you just happen to pick the number one, number two sector, and you've ridden that wave. And I think if you talk to her about in the context of, this is the business that your dad is in, you used to own a company, you know the industry pretty well. So you invested in something that you know about, and that's always valuable. It just happens to be that is a sector that is performing very well. And so, if you were in the oil and gas business and you invested in that, you would have lost money, right? And you'd still be going down, right? So it's two things: investing what you own and investing in something that has good strength to it, right? And so in a good time, right? And we showed just some charts, and we would look at the charts on stuff, and this is good, this is bad.
I do want to point out that this is based off, these decisions were based off of years of research, and you don't classify it that way in your own mind, Mr. Porter, but it really was research. Every single week, doing a radio show, talking about renewable energies, watching the market, understanding the legislation that was coming down, all these things that we researched. We're all playing into these decisions. So I mean, it's the same thing I did many years ago. I was 30 years in IT. I knew that the writing was on the wall with some micro semiconductor electronics manufacturers, and made some small investments. Scared the crap out of me. Honestly, because you don't know. First time out, I don't know what's going to happen. I really don't want to lose my money. Even if it's what we were saying before the show, what's significant to one may not be significant to another. It's significant, and especially when you're doing it the first time. So but it was a significant amount of research, is what I want to point out. So don't devalue that.
Yes, well, thank you for that, Jay. I do value all the hard work we put in over the years in trying to understand this space.
Well, also, Josh, in the context of the show's name, SolarCoaster, right? You guys have seen the good times and you've seen the bad times, and you sort of develop a feel a little bit, and you kind of get an idea of when the times are better and sort of a trajectory, right? And so, I mean, that just comes from experience, and that cannot be discounted. So, like Jay said,
wow.
Yeah, like it's good to, it's a good combination. Like you and I talking about stuff, you've got the experience in the technical and the industry stuff, and I could just look at a chart.
So there you go. So that's how we came to this place in time. And our goal here, I did, long story short, I called up Brian, spoke to Jason about this as well, and called up Brian and said, hey, we want to do a show on this. We want to find a way to share this information in a responsible way. Now that we've developed a degree of confidence, I needed to see that tangible result to have a degree of confidence enough to even speak about this with my friends and family, because I was concerned that I would steer them in the wrong direction, right? So it's not to say that I think I understand it completely at this point.
More than 99% of the people out there.
Perhaps. So I felt a degree of confidence in having that conversation. So I asked you, very simply, I asked Brian, it was, what's a method that we can employ to take that experience, that background, that newfound confidence, and provide a resource for friends, family, colleagues? And you come up with a pretty interesting idea. So you want to talk a little bit about it?
Sure. And so as we develop and talk about this idea, there is, if you look at a basket of securities, and it could be stocks, it could be bonds, it could be other traded vehicles, but the basket of, we'll say stocks in this case, the basket of stocks is called an index. And there's a broad range in how different people talk about and utilize an index, right? The most popular index in the world is the S&P 500. It's America's biggest and best growing US stocks, right? S&P 500 stocks. And so if we put together, based upon your guys' technical expertise, I'm going to add a quantitative screening mechanism. We call it systematic, and we can talk about some of the details of that later. But it's basically, we're going to own companies that are doing good in the marketplace, that offer unique edge into a solar renewable energy, the new economy. Wait, Josh, go ahead. You title it.
my favorite 3 words: the new energy economy.
The new energy economy index. Boom, there it is. So as we develop this thing, the ultimate sort of terminal end of this thing is you have an index, and Standard & Poor's, S&P, Standard & Poor's has all their indexes of that different firms or individuals or entities offer. And oftentimes there's an ETF, exchange traded fund, like TAN, that is a tradable vehicle that comes as a result of that index. So almost all ETFs offer a tradable product off of an index, right? So they just use that index that comprises the securities in that investment vehicle called an ETF, exchange traded fund. So as we develop this index, we'll talk about the rules and the process to do it, and it'll be something to keep track of, and you can see the performance of those companies that are in this index, and you'll measure the index itself, and it'll compete with other indexes.
There you go. And so that is the journey that we are embarking on, to create an index from the SolarCoaster radio show and background. And looks like it's going to be the New Energy Economy Index from the SolarCoaster. So that is our goal now. One of the things that I liked, whenever I talk to Brian, he adds a component to something. So he just mentioned that we're going to have a protocol or a process by which to evaluate on a kind of stated frequency basis the companies that are in that basket or that index or not. So that adds an element of, I would say, professionalism and rigor of analysis that we wouldn't alone have. Jay and I are great at going, whoa, those guys are awesome, and we want to be a part of that. And how do we be a part of that?
That's going to sell really well. They're going to make a whole lot of money.
we do that all the time, and it, candidly, we're usually right. But we don't necessarily know how to participate in that, and we certainly don't know when to make that move, and then how to monitor the health of that over time, and when to perhaps make an exit on it. So that's not a thing that's within our purview and understanding, right, and comfort level. That's so you're going to bring that to this process. That's very exciting. That is round peg, round hole stuff right there, Brian, because that lets us pick out some of these winners. For maybe there's a gut component to this, where it's like we're seeing the industry trend in a certain direction, and there's news and events, and there's some. We just got off of an interview with a couple of different groups, and we're like, whoa, those cats are really at the forefront, and you just know it, right? So at that stage, though, getting you involved to keep us from being kind of nuts in those decision making is really wonderful.
Yeah, well, as powerful as Josh and Jay can be, what this index is going to do is going to have some other criteria. It's going to have shareholders actually participating in it and buying the shares of those stocks. So it's going to have a screening criteria, that it's going to have good absolute strength. In other words, it's going to have to be rising, right? And it's going to have good relative strength. Like, it has to do good relative to either other renewables or other just stocks in that category. And so it's kind of a dual momentum filter is what that's technically called. Yeah, so it's not just a technical reliance, it's also the marketplace has to recognize and be putting money into it and moving those shares higher.
Okay, and we'll articulate that probably at a landing page on our website, where you'll be able to follow that over time. There is the SolarCoaster is doing some very interesting things forward. So that index is something we'll showcase in a variety of channels and platforms, be it social, be it web, be it podcasting. We'll carry that through the course of our content forward. We have been offered some interesting opportunities that have just been confirmed. One of those is a permanent channel on Solar Power International North America Smart Energy Week's giant TV platform. So we will be there in perpetuity, perhaps, with this content to share with the industry. We're really looking forward to that. You'll be able to find our index information there as well. By the way, Solar Power International is about to wrap up. Only a couple more shows. We have the big trade show, of course, and a couple of more micro shows afterwards during the EV Virtual Education Week. Once SPI wraps up, the SolarCoaster is doing some additional kind of really cool stuff. We have hired a video production group to do a brand video for SolarEdge and LG Chem. SolarEdge recently launched the Energy Hub system. LG Chem recently launched the LG 16H, by the way, 7 kilowatts continuous, 11 kilowatts peak. That makes it market dominant in the home residential battery world, folks. So we're going to be doing a brand video on that. Very high level production that's going to be consumer facing and will be launched throughout and spread and shared domestically throughout the United States. So a lot of cool things happening for the SolarCoaster. Keep your eye out for the SolarCoaster New Energy Economy Index to help you make some decisions about how to participate in this new energy revolution. Any final words, Brian?
It'll be exciting, and just to take a big macro picture of things, the U.S. fixed income market bonds essentially is about $44 trillion, trillion with a T, right? Interest rates are at record lows. Just to give you an example, the 10-year U.S. government treasury bond today closed at 0.76, right? So you're technically losing money on that because inflation is a bit higher. And that's the official measurement of inflation, which is massaged and nuanced. And depending on what demographic group you're in, if you're a senior, your inflation rate is way higher than that. So $44 trillion. The US government treasury bond market is $16 trillion. And if just a sliver of that money, right? Because the asset managers in the universe out there are looking at this bonds of their clients if their clients own bonds, and they do, because a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, right? If that 40% is going to lose their clients' money, right, relative to inflation, which is what they call the real return, right? When you hear that word real, that means they're factoring in inflation, right? So if that 40% is going to lose money, probably most likely, unless rates go negative, and then we've got some unique issues there. But of that 44 trillion, if just a sliver of that comes over into the ESG renewable market, it'll change the risk profile of those accounts. But if you had, for example, 1% of an account of that 40% of this balanced funds coming into it, that's a lot of money that could come into this side and change that risk profile, the risk reward profile of those accounts.
So there you go, folks. If you want to be able to participate in the new energy economy, maybe you've got a solar system, maybe you haven't, and you're looking for ways to do it, and you're trying to navigate all of this information out there, you're going to have a new tool, and it's going to be the SolarCoaster's New Energy Economy Index. First ever.
Perfect.
Pretty excited about it. Keep your eyes open for that. Very shortly, want to give a special thanks to our sponsors. That's Osiaco, that's Enduro Shield, and that's also Pantech Design, the creators of Adapt Energy. Unfortunately, all private companies can't buy and sell those guys, but wonderful companies that have the vision to be a part of what we're doing here, and we really appreciate them and are genuinely excited about their respective technologies. So check those guys out online. This is day 2 of Solar Power International North America Smart Energy Week 2020. First ever all virtual trade show. We hope you had a great couple of days. We really appreciate you tuning into our show. Please stay in touch. Aloha and a hui ho.
If you're watching this on YouTube, hit like and subscribe, and catch us on www.solar-coaster.com anytime.